Hey guys, let me know, just basically setting this up first of all. Do let me know if the sound may be a bit loud, just because my laptop is killing it at the moment. It's horrible, and essentially it's just overheating at the moment. So there's like a massive buzzing sound, and that's kind of killing me at the moment. So just trying to see what's going on here. Give me a second. Alrighty, we are really early. Alrighty, so we may as well get ahead when it comes down to it. Alright, so in this video, basically what we want to talk about is pretty much going to be Facebook ads. So what I want to do first of all is I want to figure out the sound. So I'm just listening to the sound just to make sure. Alright, cool. Sweet. So when it comes down to it, I've noticed that there is pretty much a way that people kind of go about their Facebook ads. And, you know, from what I've seen in terms of the group and in terms of what I've seen when it comes down to setting up the ads themselves, I feel like people generally overcomplicate it. So, you know, as best as I can, I'm just going to kind of give you a bit of a guideline in regards to how I see other brands do it, how I do see other seven-figure brands as well. But in saying that, just trying to bring it back down to how a beginner would naturally be able to do so, and then also just try to overcome those aspects when it comes to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm likely just going to show you an example of a setup, but what I kind of want to also show is just that the channel growth, you know, like I posted one live, I basically get to the point where I'm doing these lives weekly, but we've hit, you know, we had 100 subscribers join pretty much off the one video itself, the one live, and basically what I want to do is just continue doing these weekly lives because they're fun, they're enjoyable. So I'm not going to basically go into it when it comes down to it. We just want to make sure that you guys are pretty much getting value. But, you know, if you are going to come up, you are going to kind of continually come up to the lives, then hey, let's riff. Like, let's just have chats. Let's pretty much do Q&As and whatever. Hopefully each time I will naturally be able to come up with a topic or whatnot. And most cases it should be relatively easy, but in that case, like, I appreciate everyone that's subscribed so far. Hopefully we can continue this growth, this trajectory, and let's go from there. So pretty much when it comes down to it, what I want to talk about today is pretty much going to be Facebook ad structure. So the way I see it, whether it's on the Facebook group, whether it's just talking to people who are trying to get into e-commerce, everyone tends to overcomplicate it so much, and that's including myself. Even though I say that I have best practices and stuff like that, I do have ad accounts that look like a mess. They look completely disgusting, and if anyone was to look into that account themselves, they would naturally be almost shocked as I am when I look at other people's results. So there we go. When it comes down to it, you just want to kind of keep in mind that the Facebook ad structure, and once you understand how that marketing goes, you yourself will be able to understand pretty much the idea and the notion of generating leads themselves. I think when it comes down to it, it's pretty important to understand as well that people will naturally overcomplicate it. That's never something that people don't do. So what I'm trying to do here is just more so give an understanding in regards to how to improve that process. So I'm both going to show it on a Facebook ads structure and also on a Miro board. So in this case, when it comes to a Miro board in this regards, I want to kind of show you the structure that people naturally feel like they have to go through. Now, Facebook and most people online will naturally tell you that Facebook is going to have so much data. They pretty much know exactly who is pretty much buying from you, and that's true. While they do, they're not generally allowed to pretty much show you in that case, just because of obviously the iOS changes and all that jazz. Now, hence why as the algorithm actually improves, what generally happens is that Facebook is going to have better structures in terms of finding your audience. So in most cases, when you start and when you first begin, it's very likely that they already know who is very likely to buy your product as well as what niche. If not, they will find out very soon, and then that data basically gets brought back to the algorithm and it just continually improves. So while the data itself and the attribution data doesn't necessarily come back to you, they themselves will know, just based on how much people use their platforms, all the data they're basically generating, who when, where will be able to buy your product. So going back down to it, people kind of look at it, and this is kind of like the old structure of having like 3 buckets. So you've got top of funnel, which is tofu, and obviously for some reason you can't see that. You've got mofu, which is pretty much middle of funnel, and then you have bofu, which is pretty much bottom of funnel. Now, this is the old structure of how it used to be run. Tofu, top of funnel, is essentially for all the cold targeting in terms of people that are essentially never seen your brand before. So in that case, you know, when it comes down to it, you're creating advertisements that are so finely focused, because when, for example, you are selling a dog mug or basically a dog bed, the idea behind it is that the more you basically target your interests, the better the results is going to be. So in this case, what people would generally do is they would start creating multiple funnels and multiple buckets of pretty much those specific campaigns and those specific ad sets. All of those themselves at that point will then pretty much be targeting very, very finely. So this interest might necessarily have, it could have dogs, it could have animals, it could have pugs, it could have poms, like Pomeranians, and so on and so on. So you'll find that people will generally just trying to over-target. But while doing this, what you're doing is you're almost limiting what Facebook is able to do for you. Keep in mind, they've got so much data that you generally don't even need to do any of this anymore. So the idea and the notion behind this is kind of in its own right, it's no longer best practice at all. Because while Facebook has all that information, the attribution that Facebook can then link back from the actual purchases directly to your ads is not going to allow you to pretty much then be able to use that data in the form of a custom audience. So instead of kind of organizing it this way, there's actually going to be another way now that most people, especially people who get started, should generally kind of abide by. And that's kind of what I'm going to show you. So in regards to when you hear people say this, and if you are working with an agency and they are organizing it in this way, the fact that if they even have something that's targeting a middle of funnel, then in most cases you are going to be quite concerned. So a middle of funnel is basically people who have visited your website, people who maybe have, watched your videos. And back then what you could have done is you could have, targeted custom audiences by video views. By 50%. You could have targeted website visitors like so, and those ones there, website visitors, maybe in the last 7 days. So all of these types of information that you used to be able to kind of bring back into your ad account is no longer really available to you. When it comes to BOFU, which is the bottom of funnel, what ends up happening is that people are literally targeting purchases after 3 days. People are targeting add to carts after 90 days or something like that. Cart 90 days. So this type of structure doesn't really work anymore. It's just not really going to be in your best interest to kind of follow. Now, while this is probably what complicated it, while now people who pretty much get started have the luxury in order to kind of decrease the amount of effort that they put into each individual ad set or in each individual campaign, and kind of look at data from more of a consolidated view. So instead of, you having 10 to 20 different campaigns, and I can imagine someone who is a complete beginner may not be very aware of that or may not feel comfortable with that at all. The difference now is that we're going broad. So skip all that stuff. If people tell you to do that, don't do it. Basically what we're doing is we're pretty much going to consolidate everything into pretty much one of 2 buckets, if anything. So I'm going to kind of treat it as if someone is pretty much brand new and complete beginner. And in this case, I will also show you with an example on Facebook ads as well. So what you're pretty much going to do is you're going to have a testing campaign and you're pretty much going to have a scaling campaign. So in this case, and for someone brand new, let's just say you're pretty much getting started, what you want to do is you want to give yourself the best way to go about it in testing creatives that you're building towards your brand. So in the end, you still need to figure out how you're going to target your audience. You still need to figure out who you're speaking to specifically. But because you're now targeting broad, so the audience themselves is going to be broad. You want to target broad here as well. There's not going to be any need for you to pretty much target anything, any single interest or anything in particular. You just want to run broad. So the whole platform, no matter how you're kind of feeling about it, every single interest target is going to be eliminated. You're pretty much just going broad the whole time. So now when you're going to go through it, what you're going to do is this is going to be the testing campaign. So that could be like the creative testing. And then this one is going to be the scaling campaign. So in this case, let's just go CBO scaling campaign. The way you're going to go about it now is you're going to have, let's say, 1 ad set or 3 ad sets, depending on how many creatives you basically got. And then you basically want to figure that out from, it's not going to work out, is there? You then want to figure out at that point how you want to go about it in regards to the creatives that you're running, how you want to test them, how many variations you have, and whether you basically kind of are figuring out different metrics that allow you to pretty much go about in setting it up. So let's just say in this example, we had 3 creatives. So 3 creatives and basically a scroll stop. What we want to do is we pretty much want to test that all together. All of that information is naturally going to sit itself in, and then over time, you are going to start to run a little bit of ad spend to it. Once again, it's still dependent on your budget, and see how those how the data provides back. How does it feed back? From there, what's generally going to happen is that as a result of that, you are going to find that very fast based on Facebook's algorithm, as well as how you've kind of organized your creative, whether your creative is going to work well, whether it's going to be bad, the secondary metrics that are set, did you make a sale from that immediately, and then start to work into it from there. So obviously you don't want to look at it from a single day basis. You want to look at it from multiple days at the very minimum. And then from that, you kind of want to work at it to make sure that you're at least organizing how you should be, so that you can then move it into the scaling campaign. So that's pretty much all it's set. At that point there, you're pretty much just kind of adding more creators into this section here. And then the ones that do well, you're then moving it into a scaling campaign, keeping in mind that the product itself will still depend. So if you're selling multiple products, then in this case, you would have multiple scaling campaigns. Each one will have its own product. So if you have 3 products and you're obviously advertising all of them, then in that case, what's going to happen is that you will essentially have 3 different scaling campaigns. And while there are a lot more other rules that come down to it, at this stage, to get to your first 10K months, this is pretty much all you need. It's as simple as it needs to be. You'll often find that there are some cases where people have very specific changes and people have very specific setups. You don't need to worry about that. You just need to focus on what will work well for you. Especially if you're just getting started, you're basically brand new to the whole process of everything. This is pretty much the process that you're going to go about it. So we're going to go into a Facebook ad account. I'm just going to set this up just so you can see. Now, keeping in mind that this is just a borrowed ad account, so none of it is mine. Let's see. So probably what we want to do is we want to set up 2 campaigns, and let's just say that we are getting started. So what we're doing at the moment is pretty much going about it in a way that we just basically created the website, we've got our creatives all sorted, we want to start testing. So that's pretty much the first thing we're going to do. When you start testing, each of them is pretty much going to be put into an ABO campaign. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go to there. I'm just going to fix this a little bit so I can see. So you're basically going to go into a create campaign, sales. You can name your campaigns and stuff like that right now, but I'm not going to bother. You will have the option for Advantage Plus shopping, but if you don't want to do it, in this case, let's not worry about it. Let's just keep it manual. Advantage Plus shopping is its own right. It's kind of like Facebook's version of Google's Performance Max. The whole notion of it is essentially it's just taking all of the action off from your hands and doing it all for you. So it's essentially just another form of CBO, which is campaign budget optimization. So in this case now, we do have the options to kind of organize it in its own right. What I want to do is the way I want to kind of organize the campaign, the ad set, as well as the ad, is I want to name it in a way that allows me to understand what I'm doing, but it also allows someone else to understand what I'm doing. So you're always going to have purpose. So it might be creative testing. If you're doing a specific product, but it doesn't really matter just because you're going ABO. So in this case, I would just kind of put the date and then move on from there. Then at that stage, I'm going to keep it as an ABO just because I want all the budgets to be spending a certain amount of money. each ad set is going to have its own creative. So if you basically have the process of being able to test different variations, then you want to go about and create a dynamic creative setup, which means that you're going to be testing different headlines, you're going to be testing different formats of the video. Could be specific things that change in the video or things that change in the scroll stopper themselves. But if you simply just have the budget for one video and you basically made a variation change on each one, you have 3. So what that means is you're basically going to set that up accordingly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm pretty much just going to go there and just write broad. Just going to write broad and then 0811. Now, I'm just going to make sure I'm putting all this information in correctly. So website, number of conversions, we want the right pixel. You're going to always go purchase. There's no real right or any reason why you would go anything else. And in this case, you would only ever go purchases. Even if you have no purchases, you always want to aim for purchases. There's no need to ever kind of look for other people, because if you're telling Facebook that you only want add to carts, if you're telling Facebook you only want view content, then that's the type of people you're going to create. So here is pretty much where you would make that change. If you had a lot of different variations and you would just click that one, turn on. A good kind of train of thought is always going to be dependent on your product. So I like to kind of look at it as like, if you can kind of expend like 3 to 5 times the cost per purchase of the actual product itself, that's usually going to be in a good frame of mind when it comes to budgets. So if you want to kind of play with it for fun, then a budget of $20 to $30 per day, and let it run for 3 days. That's going to be in your best interest. Most likely something that is just going to save you money in the long run. You're not going to feel too overwhelmed when it starts to spend, because in the end, the whole notion of you being able to spend your money is a pain point. So you kind of want to be aware of that as well. Always start the next day to the next day. So you never want to start it exactly at the time. You always want to set it, the exact day after. So in this case, it would be the 9th, 0030. I just kind of like that one. Or you can even do 01. But make sure it's AM. AM. Yep, cool. Let's see, what other changes are there? Advantage audience, leave it as is. Placement. You can switch to original, but like I mentioned, it's kind of then is here where it's going to allow you to pretty much add different interests, but because we're not going to worry about that, I'm not going to worry about it at all. Placements is good. There is one more section that I wanted to look. I think it's here. Here we go. So attribution, always leave it to 7-day click and 1-day view. That's pretty much the best way to go about it. In terms of 1-day view is that if someone hasn't even clicked, then you don't want that data attributed back after that 1 day. But if they are clicking, then that means that there is a bit of intent, because it means that they've looked at your ad, trying to see what it is, they've clicked on it, and now you want that data back. So the more data we can try to feed back into Facebook, the better it's going to be. So 7-day click, 1-day view is going to be your best bet there. Now when it comes to new sales ads, I'm just going to kind of click one from a previous one. So in this case, I'm just going to use an existing post. Now keep in mind for yourself, if you don't have that option, just because you haven't created any, you're going to have to set it up yourself. So in this case, I will kind of explain a little bit like the primary text, the headline, the description, the call to action accordingly, and then also making sure that you've got UTM tracking as well at the very minimum. If you're not basically having enough money to pay for Triple Whale, then you want to kind of do something similar to manual UTM tracking. In this case, we're just going to go creative 1 and then pretty much just a date. So you want to have the date in all sections, just so when you're reviewing things, you can kind of be aware of how you manually kind of organized it, but then you're aware that if you are testing different creatives, then you know when you started that test. So it's all about just providing that information up front. So now what I'm going to do is just going to use this as an existing post, and I'm just going to select one. So let's just take that video. I think it's a 4x5. Cool. And then what you want to do is you then want to just build a UTM parameter. That's more so that Facebook knows to basically manually attribute that one itself. Otherwise it's not going to do it itself. In that case, what we're going to do now is pretty much just publish it. So in this case, I'm just going to publish. It might run into an issue. with payments. Yes, because I haven't got a payment set up. So that's fine. What you can see here is pretty much going to be it. So this is going to be the creative test. It's going to be an ABO. It's going to have broad targeting, and then you're going to have one of the creatives that you're testing in that ad set. Then what's going to happen is that if you do have multiple variations of multiple creatives, that's usually for someone that's a bit further down the line, you will be able to do dynamic creative testing. And that means that it's going to almost split test everything for you. And then you're going to have to do it yourself. So it's just a matter of kind of organizing it as so, and then making sure that you're kind of setting it up correctly. When you are now, let's say, going back to that scenario of having 3 people, I'm going to kind of set this up in terms of the notion of doing it in based off 3 sets. So in this case, we want to test each one. You also kind of want to have a spreadsheet just so that you can kind of have a track of these metrics themselves, and that just gives you a better idea of what's going on. So even if you're manually tracking, it's not going to be a bad way to go about it. It's just going to be helpful in that regard. So pretty much like this is good, this is happy. You then want to just change it accordingly. So broad again, broad again. You can even add like creative testing 1 if you want it at the start. So it can be like creative 1, creative 2, creative 3, and then each one is going to have its own creative. So in this case, I'm not going to bother to change that one, but I'm just going to organize it as so. So just like that, it's pretty much as simple as we needed to do it. So the idea behind kind of setting up your creatives initially, having 3 different tests, that gives Facebook enough rights in order to help you understand where your creatives are working. Is it going to be the scroll stopper? Is it the Facebook? Is it basically going to be the creatives itself that are setting this up? Or is it going to be like a bit of a flop? Now keep in mind that when you are spending this money, it's not money just down the drain. It's money that you're basically using to garner more data. That data is going to come back to you in the form of, I guess, sales proof in its own right. Whether it basically is a proof of purchase, whether it isn't. If that's not the case, there's going to be no purchases, and then you kind of want to look at secondary metrics. So secondary metrics are more so going to be along the lines of your CTRs, your CPMs, and then your CPCs. So that's like cost per click. CPM is cost per 1,000 views, and then CTR is just click-through rate. Those are going to be important if you haven't made any sales. But if you have made sales, then those secondary metrics don't really matter too much. Because in the end, like, I would rather have 5 sales that costed me $5 than no sales, but I got 100 views for 30 cents. You know what I mean? Like high quality traffic versus low quality traffic. The next thing you want to do is you kind of want to make sure, let's just say after 3 days, we've seen results. 2 of these creatives have, spent $60 and they've each made 2 sales. So in that case, you've obviously got a positive ROI. And what you want to do at that point is you want to move them into a scaling campaign. So in that case, what you're going to do is you're going to create another one, and this is going to be another sale campaign. Let's just create it as so. We don't want to create an Advantage shopping campaign. I'm going to kind of organize it from a CBO campaign. Now, I haven't tested enough with Advantage Plus to know whether it's kind of working. I have very kind of back and forth results, but obviously if you do have a bigger account, then Advantage Plus shopping, as well as having a large scaling CBO campaign, is probably in your best interest from that point and on. So this is kind of an idea for people that are complete beginners, people that are just starting, and people who want to get to that 10 grand, 100 grand marks. That's going to be important, and often you will find that to get to those marks, you don't need to overcomplicate this. You're going to see a whole bunch of different kind of notions that you need to have 10 to 20 campaigns. You need to be kind of testing different audiences all the time. I would say now, just let Facebook do it all for you. That's pretty much in your best interest to organize and just set up accordingly. So now when it comes down to it, that scaling campaign, you essentially just make sure that you've got your product. So in this case, let's just say I'm selling a dog bed. So I just want to make sure that I am selling that dog bed in this campaign. And that's basically dependent on the creatives you're testing. So from there, I could even just write scaling, and then I can even write scaling. I can do the countries as well. So I want to kind of organize for countries. So if it's US, if it's Canada, if it's Australia, then have it as so. when you're scaling, you don't generally want to have all of your countries all in one, because obviously every country is going to have its own nuances. So by separating these, you're going to be able to kind of have a bit more of an understanding in regards to the product to country allocation, as opposed to setting all 4 countries or five countries. You won't actually know which one's doing the best for you, because Facebook's not necessarily always going to give that data for you. The last thing we want to do is just have the date. So let's just say it's 2 days later. So boom, boom, like so. Advantage campaign budget. We want to turn this on. 100 to 150 bucks to begin with is usually a nice number. I always play around that number. But if you're really confident, you're seeing some really good results, then you can play a bit higher if you'd like to. I just feel comfortable around the 100 to 150 mark. And then from that, it's just going to allow you to keep moving forward. You will most likely feel comfortable as well in that 100 to 150 mark, especially if you haven't spent any money before. So it's more about kind of just getting comfortable with spending money, because you're going to have that inherent risk in order to get the rewards. You know, if you don't feel comfortable with spending money, then as a result of that, how are you going to get eyeballs on your business? It's just not going to work out. So from that point on, you want to then basically go broad. So broad, and then basically 10, 11. You don't really want to change too much details here, so keep it as so. Conversion event, make it purchase again as well, like so. Then go down, make sure you set that date accordingly. So for example, it's like the 2 a.m. like that. Then I'm just putting this as if it's been 2 days or so that's not really that big of a deal. Advantage Plus audience, like once again, if it's set up as so, you can switch it to original. They're just going through that process where they're just switching towards Advantage Plus. So every single thing will pretty much have its own. But if you do want to change the location, then it's going to be in here. So you're pretty much going to go to the original setup and then change it accordingly. Auto placements as so, and then you want to keep your attribution settings correctly, so 7-day 1-click. And then from there, what you want to do is, if you've basically ran these creatives, what you want to do then is you want to make sure that you're duplicating and you're setting up the correct post ID to get the right creative. If you're simply just trying to recreate it again, you're going to lose all engagement that's going to be on that ad itself. So what you'll find is that when I go back to these creatives here, that each of them, because it has been existing posts, these have been posted. What you'll find is that you will be able to find the post ID right here. You just copy it. It will also be in the page post as well, which is just in the settings over there. And then what you want to do is you want to go back into this creative. You then want to go to use existing post and then just enter the post ID. So I found so many instances where people kind of set up new campaigns, they set up new stuff, and then what ends up happening is that they generally are running all of these massive budgets on creatives that are brand new. They have no engagement on it. So you'll find that when people feel like they want to buy from you, engagement's going to be the best thing ever. Like if you got 10 people commenting on a post, then people will feel more inclined to join that conversation. Whereas if you basically got a bare bones creative that has no comments, no likes whatsoever, it just doesn't look right. So you got to think of it in the eyes of the consumer, and that way it's going to allow you to kind of organize it correctly. So hopefully this has given a bit more of an understanding in regards to how you would generally want this set up. From there, it's just a matter of being able to kind of dial your budgets up and down accordingly. So 10 to 30% is probably where I would stay. You don't want to make too much of a significant change in your actual ad account, just because you will run the risk of completely resetting all the optimization. And that's more so kind of just like almost like a myth. When no one ever really knows, but you know, enough people do it that they see crappy results, and then as a result of that, they're kind of just making sure that they, you know, all their results go just completely tank. So it's kind of like a idea behind people that, you know, spend lots of money. I've had it happen multiple times as well, where I've made enough changes and then everything just goes to shit. So once you've got a good thing going, don't make too many changes. Obviously, it is going to be dependent on yourself as well and just how willing you are to take risks. But in this case, creating, testing, scaling campaign, separate them by product offering and also country allocation. That's probably going to be your best bets. And then from that point on, you pretty much just want to keep on testing creatives, put the winning creatives into the actual scaling campaign, and then basically just dial the budgets up and down on the scaling campaign as required. Keeping in mind that one day of data isn't going to necessarily give you much, but you want to look at it in terms of 3 to 5 days at least. If you feel confident that you're getting really good results, then you can increase that on a lesser time frame. And also, if you are spending a lot more money, then that data will come in much quicker. So you can make decisions much faster. The where you generally don't want to be is that a budget has spent $5 and then you've turned it off because it hasn't made a sale. Just remember that you're selling a product for X number of price. You're basically buying it from a supplier for Y number of price. So that difference, there's still going to be a requirement for Facebook to send it to enough people for at least one person to buy. So you might have a CPM of 30, and if you've only spent $5, what generally happens is that you're not actually going to have enough viewers on your product. So then there's going to be enough percentage of people that is going to onto your website who are then going to buy, and then from that point on. So think of it as like a funnel, and you're going to have to be comfortable with spending money. That's never going to be not the case. So part of it is more so just understanding that once you've got this down pat, it's just a matter of being able to spend money, get those results, understand the data, and then re-optimize it accordingly. If you haven't made sales, look at your secondary metrics. It could be, your offer. It could be, for example, your creative itself is just not enticing enough, or it's not explaining the product well enough. From that point on, it's just going to be your best bet in terms of just dialing things up and down, trying new creatives, getting that stuff done, and just organizing it in a way that you feel comfortable with. In the end, it's not going to be a level of comfort hearing someone spend 10 grand a day on ads when you've never started it before. So get to a point where you feel comfortable with. $20 a day is probably really nice. Especially in the creative testing section. But then once you get scaling, if you see something that's working really well, it's getting like a 3 to 4x ROAS or even higher, it's in your best bet. Do not limit yourself. Just get comfortable with the notion of spending. It's very likely that even if you're not making sales, you're getting data which is going to help optimize further. So it's all about data, bringing data back into the platform and also making decisions based on data. So that pretty much concludes how a lot of people basically have been kind of changing how they run their platforms, especially on Facebook ads. And I would find that even TikTok ads will likely kind of reach that point as well. So pretty much that's a good notion of it. And in terms of my understanding, hopefully it was simple enough that people understand. Just keeping in mind that you pretty much got 2 campaigns in this case, 1 product, 1 country allocation, and then you want to organize it correctly as so. Dial it up and down as so. Pretty much going to organize it as simple as this. And be confident in yourself and pretty much learn to take risks. That's going to be important. It's pretty much the end. So I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you guys can get comfortable with jumping on these lives with me each week. Hopefully we'll have something to talk about, but if not, we'll just riff. And that should generally be fun regardless. So I've enjoyed this time and hopefully you guys have had as well. So hope you've enjoyed.